Hi, this is On Imagination with Philosophical Coffee, the Healing Garden. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are new to my channel, I am a philosopher, psychologist, sociologist, and many more of 30 years. And this is the space where I provide psychological guidance. I really like that word. Psychological guidance through day-to-day regarding narcissism, boundaries, communications, relationships, parenting, and what I call ethical perspective growth. Ethical perspective growth is basically the 12 stages of evolutionary development that every human being goes through, every mammal goes through. And these stages are scientific, predictable, amazing. Once you understand where your perspective is and how they work, what you can expect with each one of them, it puts you in a position where you are able to determine precisely what is wrong with your mental health, where your mental health is lacking. To not have these ethical stages internalized properly and in the right order creates mental illness. This is where mental illness comes from. And depending upon which mental illness you're dealing with, a person can literally determine which ethical perspective they are missing. For example, if you struggle with addiction, self-mutilation, and or eating disorders, you are missing the first ethic, which is precisely what we're going to cover today. Actually, we're going to be covering that all month. The second perspective is what is responsible for codependency, and narcissism comes from the third perspective. PTSD is the only exception to this. That is something that is just basic trauma exposure from any age. And there are 4 levels of trauma stages, which we will cover later. But understanding which emotional behavior defense you have allows you to take a more, the word I'm looking for, direct approach in managing your mental health. The first ethical perspective stage is courage. Now, this is something that every human person must learn. I'm going to break down courage. We're going to go over it. And like I said, we're going to be focusing on that for the entire month. This day is January 1st, and it literally launches my Radical Global Healing Plan. Before we continue, I'm going to tell you right now, I shifted yesterday into the second perspective of the U of I. So I am currently dealing with perspective sickness. I'm going to be here for the next 3 days, and I'm in the process of documenting it. And I am at the mercy of my mental health. We all are. So I'm going to do this as best I can, staying on task, which ironically allows me to also focus on what I need to focus on, which is courage, that first ethical perspective. So an ethical perspective consists of a lot of different parts. I was covering this yesterday in Philosophical Coffee. I'm going to go back to that. Let me just hop, skip, and a jump. And one of the side effects of this is of perspective sickness is basically emotional, not turmoil, but definitely emotional uprising. Crying is part of it. Yeah, let me see here. Crying, emotional insecurity. And I would say low levels depending upon the individual's, the defined self. The really bottom line is the defined self. The more defined you are, the more this affect the more do you define you are, the less this affects you. And I'm going to say this so many times, I am struggling today. So when you actually, let me just get right into it. The ethical perspectives, there are 12 of them. And you have a triangle, and there is the I of I, there is the you of I, and there is the they of I, and then that gives you that center point, which is the you, the all of I. And every one of these is a perspective. It's a point of view. So the I of I is first person point of view. The you of I is second person point of view. The they of I is third person point of view. And the all of I is omniscient point of view. In each ones of these is the 12 perspectives. So you'll run through the 12 perspectives for the U of I, or the I of I, and then you'll move on to the U of I. So I am in the second perspective of the U of I now. Yesterday I graduated from the first to the second. You start to feel the perspective shifts anywhere between the fifth and the sixth perspective on up. Definitely you feel it from the fifth to the sixth. I don't know if you feel it from the fourth to the fifth. I do not know. But you do feel it from the fifth to the sixth. That's the first time you feel it. The fifth to the sixth can be terrifying. And the more undefined you are, the more it's going to affect you. That is vital to understand. This is one of the biggest concerns that I had when I started this work, is realizing that the undefined self, if you have not done the work to establish the defined self with the philosopher's compass, and you walk into the developmental stage of the sixth perspective without it, it's going to rip you apart. From there on, the more you define the self, the more it solidifies you. You're still going to feel the perspective sickness, but it's going to be significantly less. You stop feeling the extreme fluctuations around the 10th perspective. That's when things really start to stabilize. The reason why is because you are transferring, well, I'm going to be really aggressive here. You are transferring from the corporeal plane over to the metaphysical plane between the stages of the 6th and the 10th perspective. So when you enter into metaphysics, there's an adjustment period. And the adjustment period is so violent that it's painful. It's painful, it's terrifying. It is quite literally, it rattles you. Now, this is vital for you to understand, is all of the symptoms of schizophrenia is this transition happening. It is going from the 6th perspective up to the 10th. And it literally does feel like electricity rippling through your body. It really does feel like you cannot determine reality from fiction. You really can't. Your imagination looks very, very realistic. And it's because you are transferring from one plane of existence over to the other. It is really heavy, deep into metaphysics. It's called ontology. This is my mastery. If you do not know about this, and almost no one does, this is a branch of philosophy. This is what Aristotle wrote a lot about. In fact, he wrote an entire book called Metaphysics on this very subject. And once you understand the psychology, the philosophy, and the metaphysics, the physics of all of this, it makes so much more sense. So a lot of people in the world right now have already entered into the 6th perspective, and I have a lot to say on that. But once you start to break down and walk through all the different perspectives, you really start to comprehend how much these influence our lives. These are not a little something. These are not a little cool, this is awesome. This is fucking big. Like, our generations literally can be mapped on these. As in, baby boomers are on average 4th perspective. Millennials are 5th perspective. Gen Zs are 6th perspective. And you can graduate to the next stage depending upon your educational level. The silent generation is the 2nd perspective. So you can see how they're already progressing through generation to generation. Every perspective has its own language and culture. Absolutely. Every perspective has its own language and culture. When kids these days grow up with new language, what we are hearing is the new language develop of the next perspective. It's the next cultural and linguistic perspective coming into development, which is why we hear new language, which is why we hear new terms come up from our young people. It is because they are defining the next ethical perspective. Right now, our entire culture revolves around the fourth perspective, 100%. These perspectives guide a person through their evolution, literally from birth all the way up to death, 100%. These things follow you forever. Our inability to communicate with our partners are because of these perspectives. It's because most people are married to a 4 or a 2, but you might be a 6. The 6 perspectives think, feel, are different than 4s and 2s or 3s. If you are a very spiritual person where you love your chakra stones, but your husband was a narcissist, well, I'm going to tell you right now, that's a 6 married to a 3. It is mathematical formula, and it is fucking awesome. This is really going to get cool. If your mother was highly religious, but your father was very, very Republican Party, well, that's a 2 married to a 4. If your brother was a mama's boy and your sister is the CEO entrepreneur of her business, well, that's a 1 and a 5. This is how fucking awesomely predictable these are. And every perspective has their own language and culture. So when you are out and about, let's say you are a 6th perspective and you are out and about and you see some guy on the street screaming and you don't know if he's going to start punching people, well, he's a 3. And if you see somebody who's sitting there flouting their politics and they're getting into a heavy aggressive debate, but they're definitely not going to flip over into that world of violence, that's a 4. CEOs, entrepreneurs, business minds, those are 5s. Religious people, traditions, gangsters, those are all 2s. Union workers, those are 2s. And people who are overly attached to their mother, those are 1s. People who withdraw, shroud down, tend to cower, those are 1s. 6s are your hippies. Those are your solid hippies. Hippies are your 6. Your environmentalists, those are 6s. So once you start to recognize all of this, and you start to realize the qualities, the characteristics of every perspective, your world will change. This is fucking awesome. Not only are these on a personal level, these are also on a societal level. These are on a township level. These are on a political level. These are on a sociological era. This is anthropological level. For instance, the Neolithic time period is your first perspective. Roman Empire is your second perspective. Dark Ages is your third perspective. Age of Enlightenment began the fourth perspective, and we are at the end of the fourth perspective. That is what's going on. This gets really cool. At the end of the fourth perspective, the fifth perspectives are basically the majority. And that's where we're seeing a massive boom and a massive rise in CEOs, business owners, entrepreneurs. So that's your fifth perspective. And now we are on that cusp where the world is shifting from the age of enlightenment mindset of the fourth perspective, baby boomers, over to the CEO, the business, the entrepreneur, and capitalism, because that is now shifting over. I call this the age of authenticity, because people are starting to get more authentic to their true self and becoming the author of their life. And authenticity is a massive push in our culture right now, and it's going to be for a while. This is the age of authenticity. And this is 100%. The next age after this is going to be a massive push on the age of environment. That's literally what's coming when the sixes take over. And that's really, and it gets passed on. This is where it gets really, really fascinating. This is an evolutional process that happens regardless. This is not something we consciously decide. This is our psychology. This is math. This is science. This is physics. This is embedded into our DNA on such a level. It's extraordinary. All mammals go through this. I do not know yet if reptiles do. I'm watching. I'm curious. Cats do. Chimps do. Dolphins do. Elephants do. Which is why elephants and dolphins are smarter in many ways than most humans. If you remove the communication and linguistic element, it's a whole new world. really it's important to set language and linguistic aside. If you fail to internalize these ethics in the proper order, then you're going to have mental illness develop, significant mental illness. Mental illness only exists in the first 4 perspectives. They cannot develop with, they just don't develop with the others. Because by the time you get to the 5th and 6th perspective, you have figured that there's something up. You want to get mentally better. By the way, that's 5th and 6th perspective. 5th perspectives are the ones who think, oh, maybe I should consider getting therapy. But you're not going to really get very far with it because you haven't learned that ethic to actually internalize it. And that ethic is accountability. So as soon as you graduate from the 5th to the 6th perspective, you have internalized accountability, and now you get serious about your healing. So 6 perspectives are the ones who are all focused on healing, is because they've internalized the appropriate ethics to go, I need to prioritize this. That is precisely one of the things that gets priority when you shift over to a 6th perspective. So my goal for the entire 2024, I have the Radical Global Healing Plan that is completely designed, ready to go, and we're starting it literally today. Every one of these perspectives is going to be a focus for the next 12 months. There's 12 ethical perspectives, and we have 12 months. That is not coincidence. That is math, because we are mathematics, we are physics, we are geometry, and our psychology literally is wrapped around the same elements that give us the calendar. Really cool. So we have 12 ethical perspectives, and we have 12 days in the calendar year, or 12 months in the calendar year. We are a clock. We are a clock. So we're going to go ahead and focus on the first ethic for January, the second ethic for February, the third ethic for March. And at the end of January, I have the Healing Garden Summit, where we're going to focus on the full 3 days of the first, second, third ethic. And then in April, we're going to do another summit, which is going to be the 4th, 5th, and 6th ethic. And it's going to be a condensed version of all of those things in those 3 days. And it's going to be focused around a massive amount of healing and authors. There's a lot that's planned for it. So this is all part of getting people this information so they can start applying it. The first ethic is courage. And courage is a whole nother creature. It's one that I'm going to be pulling apart. Now, when you have the ethics, there are certain checklists that have to take place. This is about your relationship with authority, autonomy, and your relationship with the self. It is how you build up a defined self. So that if you lack these ethics, you're not going to have a completely defined self, and you're going to end up having an existential crisis, which is what's going on with most people in the world today. They're not broken. They're not mentally ill. They are experiencing something called an existential crisis. It means that they don't understand their existence because they lack the defined self. This is not psychology. This is philosophy, which is the defined self. So once you start to understand all of the elements of the defined self, you can start putting yourself back together again. The first tool I use to do this is what I call the Philosopher's Compass, which is a triangle. And it comes in 4 parts, 12, 3, 3, 3, and then 3 in that dead center where you can have your point. Once you have all 3 points filled in, the I of I, the you of I, the they of I, then you can precisely locate your coordinates in the center. Every one of these 3 points, 4 points with the point in the center, also has 3 elements to each point, equaling 12. It's really fucking cool how 3, 4, and 12 just keeps playing over and over in this. So the first ethic is courage. And courage is quite literally consent. It is absolutely when you choose, when you give consent to begin the journey of the self. And the very first thing you have to confront is fear. It is your courage and your self versus your fear. We experience this first ethic in the first perspective when we are 1 year old, usually around our first year of birth. And this is where parents really need to pay attention. In our children, there is an inner struggle going on. Oh, we're going to talk a lot about parenting. There is an inner struggle going on. And that inner struggle is that self, the child, the individual has to overcome their fear using courage. It is the battle of the self. Either you do it or you don't. And no one can do this for you. It is the ultimate concept of, do you have the ability to consent and choose the journey of overcoming your fear to discover the self? It is literally a voyage into the unknown, because at this stage, you don't know who you are. This is fucking terrifying. But you have two choices. You can cower or you can embark. And this is ultimately the decision that every child must make before they are 2 years old. The problem is, and we're going to really delve deep into the interference that occurs during incompetent and ignorant parenting that fucks this up. Because fucking this up is the problem. We'll be really spending an entire month just on this process. What goes on inside the human mind during this conflict is vital to core comprehension of what you are capable of doing. This is such a massive David and Goliath inside the human psyche. And it has to be done alone, and it has to be done, should be done, before 2 years old. And the infant cannot speak. So there is no communication of this. There is no articulation of this. But without this, addiction, the inability to self-comfort, lacking self-authority, lacking autonomy, all of these are the consequences. It is literally the core foundation to human development. And it is grossly missing in our culture. Because this is missing in our culture, there is more mental illness. This is so much the primary core of everything that is wrong. I cannot explain it enough. I'm going to be covering what happens when there's interference with this. I'm going to be covering how to solve it. I'm going to be covering how to parent yourself to get this back in you. I'm going to be covering all the self-care that's required to get this back to you. And I'm going to be covering what parents can do to ensure they leave their children the fuck alone so they stop interfering with this process. Because that is what's going on right now, is a lot of parents stupidly, ignorantly interfere with this process. And as a result, children are not learning this challenge. And as a result, this is why narcissism is rampant. This is why so many mental illnesses are so out of control, is because the child has not learned how to overcome their own fear using courage. It is, my God, is it so vital. The concept in the definition that we use about courage, what we think courage is, and this is where we have this massive psychology around courage. Courage is, how do I even begin to explain it? In our culture, it is something that toxic masculinity has abused. So there is what it is properly logically, the logic definition. And then there is what the fourth perspective society has defined it as. And then there is that's pretty much it. It's the logic of what it is, and then there's the fourth perspective of what it is. And everybody is very familiar with that fourth perspective. No, there is another one. It's what the abuser calls it. So there's the abuser's perspective of courage. There is the fourth perspective's definition of courage. And then there's the logic definition of courage. So when I read to you any vocab word out of a dictionary, it is a fourth perspective definition, because fourth perspectives wrote this shit. Fourth perspectives were limited by the society that is fourth perspective. So 100% of our material right now today is fourth perspective. But there are 12 perspectives. As a result, there's going to be a lot of bias, a lot of limitation, especially as you come to learn the fourth perspective. You're going to see just how much this has permeated our toxicity, our culture, our abuse, our mindset. It's fucking disgusting. Now, that being said, the abuser uses words as a way to abuse psychologically and how to put people down, how to control people. So there's the abused version of every word that I look up. And then there's the actual definition. My definition is based off of logic, fourth perspective concepts that I pull from Pythagoras and Plato and from my 12th plus perspective. So when I give a definition, it is based off of logic, the 12 plus perspectives, Pythagoras, and basically it's Greek philosophy. It's the pre-Roman era. So I'm going to give you the three definitions and we're going to go through this. So according to the fourth perspective dictionary, we have the ability to do something that frightens one. Bravery. They have defined bravery. They have not defined courage. This is common. So again, the ability to do something that frightens one. Strength in the face of pain or grief. And they are talking about braveness. Braveness is not courage. Absolutely not. In the abuser's mindset, there is cowardice is a massive, massive abusive tool. Coward is a label that abusers put on people, toxic masculinity, to make and force a male in our society stronger and better than is natural for them. It's also used a lot of times to force a first perspective, second or third perspective prematurely into the fourth perspective. This is called perspective abuse. This is fucking dangerous to the psyche. This is one of the most toxic things that happens is the fourth perspective is notorious for bullying the first, second, third perspectives prematurely into the fourth. As a result, people are forced to behave like a fourth perspective before they've even internalized these ethics, which is why people are not internalizing these ethics, is because they are not given the time required to internalize them. Because the fourth perspective is saying, no, you have to conform. The fourth perspective's priority is conforming, and that is all they prioritize. As a result, people who are trying to learn this, and I have seen literal toxic masculinity bully 2-year-olds into a fourth perspective mindset. I have seen grown men scream and punish 2-year-old boys for being a mama's boy. Yeah. Perspective psychology. Now, what is really going on with courage when you break down the mind is it is a confrontation. In order to understand what's really going on, you have to understand self-autonomy, and you have to understand self-authority, and you have to understand the dynamic with the comfort zone. So we're going to do this. You have your comfort zone. This is most renowned with the mother. The mother is usually defined as the comfort zone. And then there is this beautiful place here, the adventuring zone or the growth zone. This is where discomfort does occur, but this particular slot is where it's healthy and it's growth. And then a little bit further is where pain begins. This is where you get cognitive dissonance. And then a little bit further is where you get fear. This is what I like to call the fear zone. This, when you have too much trauma exposure, or when you have too much exposure, creates trauma. This is where you start to rewire the nervous system because of overexposure. What we need to learn at this time period is how to regulate this entire spectrum with exposure theory, with our own exposure therapy. The child is the one who needs to do this, not the mother. And that's the first thing we screw up. Is the mother does this. That is called enabling. Oh, good God, is it really toxic parenting? Because what you are doing is when a child is enabled, what's really going on is they have been denied their authority and their autonomy. Autonomy is the defined self, but you do not get the defined self without proof of concept. If you don't do to prove with evidence, then you don't become. But the mother interferes and negates the doing through her enabling because she's insecure and she's using her child as an emotional prosthetic and she's completely convinced the child will fail. which communicates to the child that the child will fail, which takes away the child's ability to prove to the child that the child can. This is our very first primitive can versus can't do mentality. This is why we think I can't. This is how it leads to I can't save myself. Therefore, the child never does. Therefore, the child doesn't. Therefore, the child doesn't become. And as a result, the child doesn't know who the self is because it has been undefined. Now you have a child who does not know who he is in the event of X. The self is only defined in a set scenario. So if you have, this is really important, if you have X, and you have not been tested or tried in that scenario X, you don't know. It's either you can, you can't, or it's undefined. And if the mother does it for you, you remain undefined, and the mother communicates that you can't, which becomes your default setting. I can't. Now you require your mother to do it for you because you think you can't because you never did because you're undefined. But here's the problem. You've got the consequence. You've got the rewards. This is what happens when you put psychological fruit in front of something without the reward. When you get psychological fruit, I'm going to cover what that is here in a minute. The psychological fruit hangs on the other side. Now, there's only one pathway to psychological fruit, technically. Do, can, get the fruit. Do, can, get the fruit. That is a fantastic, healthy, that is psychology. That's the way it's supposed to be. The child does, the child can, the child gets the fruit. The fruit, in this case, is authority, the defined self. But when the mother enables, what really is going on is the child is getting the fruit without getting the fruit. As a result, she bypasses this entire process for the child, teaches the child that the child cannot. The child still gets the fruit, and the child learns that they can't do it. The child also learns that they need their mother. Now you have codependency. This is where this comes from. Now, if the child did not get the fruit, the child would still be in the undefined stage because the child never did. So the child has two choices, providing that the mother backs the fuck off. The option is the child can or the child is undefined. So if you have a child who never tries, it will remain undefined, but the child wants the fruit. The fruit in this case is independence. This is really vital because this is a human being who cannot walk, cannot talk, cannot feed itself, cannot stand. Oh, this is not going to go well for us. We are not okay with this. I remember watching my children at this age just screaming out of frustration because they couldn't. It was my daughter's job to calm herself down enough to problem solve. But that's not going to happen if she's not given the opportunity. You have to let them scream. You have to give them the time to figure it out. The mother can encourage. The mother can be a cheerleader. The mother can say, go do, yes, you got this. But the mother cannot do it for them. The minute she does, and she gives them the fruit, she gives them a different program to learn. And that program is going to completely fuck this up. This is where codependence begins. Now, if she remains uninvolved, now the child has the ability to choose, I can, or it's undefined. Either way, now the child has one option. Either you get the fruit or you don't, and the child will get the fruit. The child will always get the fruit because this is good fruit. This is what we are driven to get, is this fruit. We want to learn how to walk. We have to learn how to walk. We want to learn how to talk. We want to learn how to be independent. No 2-year-old ever wants to be told what to do. We're not supposed to. We are natural free beings. We are programmed to be free. So we already have the motivation in place. We are all set. Mother Nature dropped us in the world and said, there you go, you're all set. Just leave it alone. But we have mentally ill mothers who can't leave children alone. They project their own mental illness onto their children, and they interfere with this process. If the mother is healthy and backs the fuck off, now Mother Nature will take over and everything's all set. The child will have the motivation and the self-discipline to confront two realities: that they have to calm down their own emotions and problem solve, and they have to face their fear of the unknown. The unknown is only the undefined self. All fear is only the undefined self. That's it. It is the undefined self in scenario X. It is the undefined self in scenario B. It is the undefined self. Every time you have a fear, it is because you don't know if you can survive it, because you haven't been tested. Or someone did it for you. You haven't been tested. Or you're too afraid to try because you lack the courage. And that's where this comes into place. Once you have the courage, which is the final decision to say, I'm going to do it. The concept, the psychology that goes behind the determination to try, to do. I see Yoda in my head right now. There is no try. Do or do not. The psychology that goes behind this, the emotional chemistry that occurs, is the decision to change. You have your fear. This is your obstacle, fear. Can you? Will you succeed? Will you fail? How many times do we stand and fall on our diapered butts and stand again? We're not afraid of failure. That's taught to us. We see this obstacle and we have a choice. We're frustrated because we want psychological fruit that we can't get. And we're just stuck in this place of complete immobility. We are stuck in a place where we cannot communicate. We are so alone in that first year. Imagine going an entire year not being able to talk, not being able to use the bathroom, not being able to feed yourself, not being able to walk. You are at the complete and total mercy of somebody else who can do all of this for you. And you've got all the equipment, you're fine. You can do it. But you've got to pass one test. You've got to calm yourself enough to think. You have to calm yourself enough emotionally to problem solve, to observe, and to take action. But fear is a massive obstacle in the way. And the thing that really it comes down to over and over again is that final choice to decide that this is going to be a voyage that you take. It's a choice that every single one of us makes. And when the mother steps in and interferes, it completely derails the whole process. Now, what happens when you do take on, when you do succeed, when you do finally have the courage? And we see this so many times with adult children who never learn this process. It is the difference between calming yourself down with your emotions and problem solving. Deciding that you want something better, deciding to prioritize change. This is huge. It's the concept and the comprehension that you have your comfort zone, your security blanket, and that you can leave that comfort zone and venture forth. Adventure is only adventure if you're excited about it, if you consent to do it, and if you're wanting to do it. And if you can't do it, if you choose not to, if you're afraid of the adventure, the comfort zone becomes a prison. And to not learn this lesson results in 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds cowering in their mental prison, terrified to take on challenges, terrified to go forth with any change. They become shut-ins. They have social anxiety that blows out of proportion because they don't have the courage to overcome and choose to disembark. And that's really, when you break down the psychology, and this, I'm going to switch it a little bit. This is the I of I. Let's switch it over to the U of I for a minute. The I of I is when you choose to have courage of the self. It's when you choose to overcome the obstacle and do. But in the U of I, now it's the choice to disembark on a journey with a partner. There's a lot at risk. And it still comes down to, all right, you had the courage to discover the self. You decided to embark on the journey of self-discovery. It is fucking scary. You have 12 different stages. And prior to now, they have not been defined. They have not been known. They have not been cataloged. They have been absolutely unknowns. And we subconsciously knew that every one of these perspectives consists of its own language and culture, which the further you learn, the more you're going to grow away from your parents. You're going to lose your comfort zone, quote unquote, your belonging, the more you evolve. So to discover the self is to lose the belonging, is to lose the primary home. So as a result, we're back to that fear again. Do you have the courage to venture forth on your own? This is the journey of independence. Bottom line, this is the journey of independence, self-independence. And this is the first test. So let's assume for a minute that you've done this. You've gone through the 12 perspectives. Now the next voyage is going to be you undertaking this voyage with a partner. Same 12 perspectives. You have to choose in that very first perspective to make a choice to be vulnerable, to learn this, to venture into an unknown territory that you've never been before. And there's risk, there's danger, there's unknown, there's no defines. And it's not just you. You have to trust somebody else to do it with you now. That is fucking scary. And it comes down to, are you going to have the courage to consent to this journey? Because that's really what a child does when they finally decide to calm themselves, stand, and overcome their fear, is they choose to consent on this journey. And to not do so cripples the human being, cripples the individual. The relationship of courage to autonomy is vital. Autonomy is the defined self. It is the identity. And courage defines this massive foundation. Do you have the courage to stand up for yourself? And every time you are in a situation where you have a choice of courage, face your fear, courage, or cower, go back to the comfort zone. This is it over and over again. Are you going to grow or are you going to shrink? Those are your options. Are you going to stay safe? Or are you going to take a risk and grow? Are you going to go back to your comfort zone and wall up? Or are you going to push your limits and explore what you're capable of? And this fear is absolutely a massive part of this transaction in this process. And the more you do this, the more you define yourself. At what point do you stop? At what point do you decide, you know what? I have finally gone too far and I can't do this. This is where learning how to self-soothe, learning how to comfort yourself, learning how to regulate is the process of, you're in a boxing ring, you're in the corner's the safe zone. The bell goes off and now it's time to go into that discover zone. Now it's time to go into the growth zone. You get up there, you do your fight, you go back to the corner. How many times are you going to jump up when that bell rings before you say, I'm just not doing it anymore, I just can't? And then you're going to go further. You're going to go further back. You're not even going to get in the ring. You're going to stop going to the gym. You're just not even going to try anymore. You sell the equipment because we cannot sit still. We're either going forward or we are falling back over and over again. It is an amazing process. I'm going to leave it here. We're going to go ahead and do some meditation. And then when we come back, I'm going to do parenting and go from the parent's point of view and show the mother and the father what it is they need to do. Now, also, in addition to the parenting aspect of this, if you don't have, this is what I love about this the most. Take a look at how your parents parented you. Were they over-enabling? Were they neglectful? How were you able or not able to do this process? How many times has it come back and bit you? How many times is it constantly something you struggle with? This is a big deal. You're going to have to learn how to parent yourself, and I will be covering this in the second half. You have to learn how to parent yourself in order to train yourself how to do this. But this is the first step. Once you understand courage, once you understand that that's really what you need to tap into to start doing this, and there's a right way to do it and not a smart way to do it. And the not a smart way can be dangerous because that's basically exposure therapy without you being prepared. So I'm going to cover the smart ways that you can do this properly. That way you don't damage your psyche any further. And it's a fantastic aspect when you look at the parenting because it allows you as the child to see what happened to you, what didn't happen to you, what you need to do for yourself, because there is a lot of self-parenting when it comes to healing. Self-parenting is vital because you're going to have to learn how to parent and then provide your parenting skills to your inner child. Once you have that aspect down, you learn how to parent properly. Now, furthermore, if you already are a parent or you're wanting to become a parent, this is how you can literally learn the skill properly so that you get the best out of your child, so that your child is at the best nurturing development. That way they don't get this damaged. So we'll go ahead and we'll do some meditation. We'll do some visualization, and then we'll do the gratitude journals. And then from there, we'll move into the parenting aspect of this, which I'm going to be doing from now on is coupling all of this with the parenting aspect. So just deep breath for a minute. Courage is something really amazing. When you meditate, you can really turn inward and search yourself for the courage. And feeling frail, vulnerable, apprehensive are all normal emotions for somebody who struggles with courage. And then we're going to go over what toxic masculinity does with the words, because a lot of people suffer a lot of abuse by not having courage. So there's a lot of association trauma there. Deep breath in and out. And in and out. If you were raised in a toxic masculine environment where cowardice was something that you were abused with, understanding how they projected their own abuse onto you is a good place to start with that. Okay, deep breath in and out. And in and out. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Deep breath in. For journaling, we're going to go ahead and do gratitude journaling. The you are statements. With gratitude, you are grateful for. It's really, I encourage people to be grateful for their ability to learn by really acknowledging your ability to learn. It's a reminder that you can learn, that you can change. From the gratitude journaling, with the you are grateful, take a look at the qualities that you desire in yourself and select the quiet qualities that you want. And these are qualities that allow you to reflect so that you can make a goal of achieving them, doing them, and becoming them. One moment. When you do this, courage-based, it literally is choosing to be courageous, choosing to problem solve. Do not bully the self. Be gentle. You are courageous. You problem solve. You choose to consent. This is a big deal with the consent here. You consent to undertake the voyage of discovering the self. It is a big choice to make. It's acknowledging all the different aspects of what to expect with the discovery of the self and choosing to prioritize it, choosing to see it through to the end. By putting yourself in that kind of a mindset, it's a huge contribution to your healing to really decide to have the courage to see it through to the end. Excuse me. And patience is a huge tool to get us through it. As these ethics are internalized, this is a big part of this, there's a lot of little things that are big things that are going to go away on their own. Things like ruminating, what if statements. The more you progress through the ethical stages, the more all of the trauma literally just falls right off. These are literally the resolution. Them being absent is what results in all of the other consequences. The more you become defined, the more you really solidify each ethical stage, the more it really sinks in and the more it really rounds you out. By focusing on just courage this month, it is a huge, huge advancement because it's becoming aware of it. You are seeking proof of concept. And in order to pull this off, there's going to be a set collection of tools that you'll need, which we'll cover here shortly. And awareness is a big part of this. Just having the education and then being able to journal and document what parts of you are courageous, what things you need more courage to overcome. Think of I want, and then what is in your way? What obstacles? What is preventing you from accomplishing? By identifying the obstacles and what you want, that is that's it right there. And then by adding that emotion of courage, having the resilience, the determination, the resolve to stand up and say, all right, I want X. There's my psychological fruit defined. This is in my way. Problem solve it. How am I going to get it? Now, a lot of people, especially those who struggle with that first perspective, their first solution is to avoid. They want to get the fruit without going through the process. This is cheating the system, and it does not work. You cannot get the fruit unless you go through. There is no getting over the problem. You have to go through the fear. And the way I liken this is you're in a room, and this room is called your comfort zone. We're back over here. And what you want is located over in that growth zone. And in order to get to that growth zone, you are going to have to go through the door. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. The right tools prepared for the right time will give you what you need to get the courage to go through the door. It is proving to yourself that you can and that you will succeed. And if you don't succeed, it's okay. You can try again. There's no limitation here. There's no expiration date. So once you understand that you can get through that door, you're proving to yourself what your strength is. Your proof of concept in this case is proof of resilience and proof of strength. And that's vital. Proof of resilience, proof of strength. And then from there, you have the ability to persevere. This is the other thing you're looking for. And keep trying it again. Your ability to problem solve. Your ability to say, okay, what do I need to do differently? And then using that desire, fueled by the choice of courage to overcome the obstacle, get through it so that you can finally obtain the fruit. And once you do it the first time, celebrate, wallow in the joy of it. After you wallow in the joy of it, you have the ability to really teach yourself Reflect. Reflection allows you to internalize it. It is evidence. Use it as such. Your brain needs this as evidence so you can really process this. This is how it internalizes. And then do it again. What's your next problem? Sometimes we have an obstacle that's huge. The fruit is vast. Create a smaller fruit. Create a smaller obstacle and then go through it. Go small. And this is where don't bite off more than you can chew. Start small. Have it something that's not going to be overwhelming. Have it something that it's going to be simple. Have it something that it's going to be enough to test you so that you can train. Literally think of it as training yourself. That way you build up resilience and you can get through it. And then do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again. It only takes about 3 or 4 times. 3 or 4 times. And then you get out of that room and you live in the adventure zone. And then it comes into the next point where you have to learn how to toggle basically your maintenance and your first aid with comfort zone. And the comfort zone is literally like your shop, where you go back and you take the car into the shop to get its oil change. And then you can go back, have your adventure. And then, oh, I need to change my oil again. And then you go back to the comfort zone. Skills in life is letting you know when it's time to leave the adventure zone and take the car into the shop. And this is where you just need practice. Because of this right here, the lack of knowing, the lack of understanding how to manage this process right here, a lot of people are terrified of adventuring. A lot of people are terrified of doing. It's because they don't understand this concept. Once you understand this concept, it literally is the power. I'm going to really emphasize this. This is the power that teaches you all the lessons you need in order to get into this. I'm thinking. This is havening, by the way. This is physical touch is a huge part of havening. And it is activating the nervous system associated with comfort in touch. Really, really fantastic for the first ethic. So I will probably be doing a lot of havening. And there's a few rotations. There's this one. And then there's running along your thighs. It's your hands on your thighs, just brushing down from the top of your thigh to your knee. And then back to your face. And then this. And you can just run this through many, many times. It is fantastic for self-soothing. It is fantastic for rewiring your psychology. And when it is done properly, it can literally diminish a trauma memory down to non-existent within a few minutes. It's very, very powerful. Proven by neuroscience. I absolutely love and approve of havening. When you are feeling insecure, when you are feeling frightened, this is a phenomenal calming tool for the self. This is self-parenting. This is literally activating the same things inside of our minds that our mother skin-to-skin contact gave to us. It is, and I can already feel it in my brain. It's wonderful. Combine it with meditation, deep breath in and out. When you internalize courage, you're going to feel so empowered. because courage is literally the tool that really solidifies. Now, boundaries. We're going to cover boundaries tomorrow, because to really grasp courage, you need to feel safe enough to do it. But because we're all adults who never learned courage, we need to feel safe, which is your boundaries. So we'll cover boundaries. And when we cover boundaries, that'll be able to provide us most likely with the safety, security that we need to embrace our courage. It is vital that you feel safe before you pursue courage. If you do not feel safe, you're going to struggle with courage. Psychological safety is vital to courage. I cannot explain that enough. That is such a huge part of this comprehension. It is vast. That psychological safety is the be all end all of finally saying, okay, now I can have courage. And if you never felt psychologically safe, courage was never going to be something you were going to easily obtain. So your psychological safety is paramount. Once you feel psychologically safe, you have to be consequence-free. In order to do that, you require boundaries so you can feel psychologically safe. Boundaries are actually personal laws. We're going to cover parenting here in a minute. And then from there, you'll need the comfort zone, which will provide the appropriate tools for your maintenance. And then getting that proof of concept up so that you can obtain and accumulate the evidence that you can. Now, the consequence of all of this is authority. That's what you get from this, is authority. And you get autonomy. You really get autonomy. Authority comes in on the next stage. By getting autonomy, it allows you the defined self that you can. The ultimate lesson to learn here is literally the you can save yourself. It's equivalent to you fighting a dragon. And either you can stay in the castle and wait to be saved, which is narcissism, or you can jump in, grab the sword, and fight the dragon. And having the tools available so that you can defeat the dragon is vital to your success. And the problem is, a lot of people do not have the tools to succeed at defeating the dragon. So as a result, they think they can't. There's a difference between can't do and lacking the skills and lacking the knowledge. So once you have the skills in place, you can quite literally jump in and accomplish this. So in the area of the mother, if you are a parent, caregiver, mother, father, if you are in a parental role, the primary goal, the primary role of any parent is to provide psychological safety to the child. Psychological safety is vital to this entire process occurring. If the child does not feel safe enough, they won't do it. If you, as a child, did not feel safe enough, you won't do it. Psychological safety is a psychology term that most people have never heard of. And it is absolutely imperative that we really mainstream this knowledge. Psychological safety is absolutely mandatory for human growth, human development, mental health. Everything is dependent upon it. I'm going to give you a list of things that a child requires in psychological safety. The child has to feel psychologically safe enough to say no. They have to feel psychologically safe enough to tell the truth. This is something I'm really aggressive about. If someone lies to you, it is a reflection on how psychologically safe they don't feel. It is not a reflection on their malicious intent. It is actually a reflection on the person being lied to. If a person is being lied to, it's because that person is not psychologically safe. You want your children to tell you the truth? You have to give them a psychologically safe place for honesty, which means no consequences. Consequences is where a lot of people really do not understand parenting. There is mother's nature's consequence. And then there is man's consequence. So we're going to make this very clear. It is mother's nature's job to give your child the appropriate consequence. It is not your job to do mother's nature's job for her. Way too many parents think Mother Nature is not competent. They think Mother Nature is too cruel. Mother Nature will take care of it. She already has. It is the interference with Mother Nature that really fucks this up a lot. The problem is, your job as a parent is to be a cheerleader. That is all. You are just a cheerleader. You can be an advisor only when they ask. This is vital. Non-consensual advice is toxic and abusive. We have a really poor understanding of listening and talking. We have a really poor relationship with teacher and student. Authority and vulnerability are absolute partners here. Your child is already vulnerable. As a child, you were vulnerable. The parent by default had power, had advantage, which a lot of people mistake for authority. And that's the problem. Advantage just means that you're older, wiser, bigger, stronger. That's it. It does not mean you have authority. It does not mean that somebody else does not have authority. Authority can be violated with non-consent. And unfortunately, this is done way too much. Without knowing it, many parents, especially teachers, have a massive problem with lording their advantage over the vulnerable. This teaches children that they are not psychologically safe. Not at all. When you force a child to be your student, when you force your child to listen, you are actually violating the child's vulnerability with your ego trip. This significantly damages the psychological safety. As a result, the child is most likely going to close up. They're going to withdraw. Your job is supposed to be an elevator person. You are supposed to support, praise, cheer on. That's all you are supposed to do. There is one other job a parent is supposed to have, aside from being a glorified cheerleader, until your child has learned objectiveness and boundaries, it is your job to ensure two things. Other people do not violate your child's boundaries, and your child does not violate the boundaries of others. But this does not happen. What ends up happening is the parents end up violating the child's boundaries by enforcing their own authority, rules, traditions, culture, religion, politics onto the child. The parent, in most cases, is the number one person responsible for perspective abuse. And they do this without having any idea. They want to be a good parent. Their intentions are good. They love their child, but they're ignorant. Because they don't understand proper parenting, they overcompensate. I have something on my website called the parenting pendulum paradigm. This is where a parent, as a child, was subjected to X. Let's say they were subjected to the Republican Party, and their parents were so abusive that they averted so much that they became a Democrat. Now, because of the political abuse, they went the extreme way. Now they parent with their extreme avoidance. I don't want anything to do with politics, or I'm a Democrat. This is all about fear. Now the child comes along of this parent, and the child is going to have one of two things. Most likely, this parent is going to enforce democracy, the Democrat Party, onto the child, or they're going to have zero politics. So now this child is raised at the extreme of zero politics. And as a result, they're going to go the other extreme. It depends. This is where you get somebody who might go zero politics to reflect and mirror, or they might go the full aversion. Or here's something else that happens. This parent is going full zero politics, but this child is genuinely interested in politics. So this child speaks up to say, I want to talk about politics, and this child abuses and says, no, I don't want around me, because it's a trigger response. So the child then becomes aversion, and this child will go to the extreme of whatever they were parented, if there's trauma there. The other flip side of it is they will mirror and reflect. As a result, they swing back and forth constantly between the paradigm. So that one generation's here, the other generation is here. We see this a lot with people who clean. My mother was OCD. Dirt was banned from the house. I became a slob. My daughter is now an obsessive clean freak. Her daughter will probably hate dirt. You see how this works? The OCD and cleaning is a huge trauma thing that goes back and forth. My mother's mother was absolutely hoarding slob. So my mother became a massive, I got sick because there were no germs. That's how bad it was. So then I became really lax, not that bad, but lax. And then my daughter. So this is a generational parental paradigm where the other, to avoid the trauma, will go the other way. The problem with this is no one is learning balance. So what ends up happening is neglect. Neglect is a huge problem with this. You see a child who was really neglected become overprotective. And then that child, because the child is so protected, becomes neglectful. This child is so neglected that it becomes, and now you have the back and forth. And as a result, this is where this comes from. This is where you've got that enabling parent trying to be a good parent because my mother was such a bad parent. I want to make sure I don't repeat my mom's mistakes. But instead of doing a nice harmonized balance, they go extreme. And now they are parenting with a polarized black and white trauma response. And as a result, they're no longer the cheerleader. They're the helicopter parent. So the cheerleader becomes the helicopter parent. And that child grows up being way too neglectful. So that child's not going to become a cheerleader. That child is going to become absent. That child is then going to become a helicopter parent. No one is being the cheerleader because what's happening is you have the absent parent versus the helicopter parent versus the absent parent. You need to be a cheerleader. The job is to stand in that fantastic zone of you are going to take action and have your own autonomy, have your own authority. And I'm going to stand on the sidelines of your life. A parent belongs on the sidelines, cheering, enthusiastically, praising. Then you've got the parents who don't praise, they criticize. They turn down, they project, they lash out. You're supposed to be a cheerleader. Now, as far as managing the safety, and this is where it gets really, really skilled because a lot of parents do not know at what point do you interfere. If the child is physically going to be in immediate harm, interfere. Preventative measures are best. For instance, if you have a gas stove and you're cooking, put up a gate. Do not let your child in the kitchen when you're cooking if that's possible. If your child is young enough, put the child in the playpen. Do not let the child wander around. Why is this so hard for parents to understand? It's such a simple problem solve. Do not let a toddler wander in the kitchen when you have an open flame. That way, you don't have to slap the child's hands and say, don't do that. Like you don't want the child to get burned. I remember I was 4 and I was dancing ballet behind a stove. My mom ignored this. I was pirouetting behind a kerosene heater. And I fell, and my entire arm from here all the way up was burned. 2nd-degree burns. That's when my mom decided to get up. So in hindsight, like I'm looking back at that as a mom going, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing, Mom? What are you doing? So preventative measure is best. And this is really, don't overprotect. This is a great example. I love the coat example. It's 20 degrees outside. The toddler doesn't want to wear a coat. Don't make the child wear the coat. Don't argue with the child. Give the child the authority. You don't want to wear the coat? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to. It's your choice. Use the words, it's your choice. Now, take the coat. You carry the coat. Let the child get to know Mother Nature. And that's really it. When it's between your child and Mother Nature, you need to step back. This is really it, is you are co-parenting with Mother Nature. This is a big deal. You are co-parenting with Mother Nature. You need to decide where Mother Nature ends and where you need to step in. Creepy pedophile across the street, that's you. That's not Mother Nature. That's you need to step in. That's all you. You need to step in. But the weather, that's Mother Nature. Your child needs to have a conversation with Mother Nature. You at the stove cooking, really, preventative measures. Make sure your child cannot wander freely until they're old enough to understand. Electrical things being crammed into the sockets. Put in the child protect. There is so much stupid shit out nowadays that allows parents to get child protective gates, child protective. Everything is so accessible. Child-proof your house for your toddlers. Should you let them climb the stairs when they're ready? Yes. Should you protect their heads? I think now they have helmets for children. I love this. This is new, is they have like helmets now for children. Now, when they get older, where they're no longer in the toddling stage, now it's, and this is really it, is are we dealing with their autonomy and authority, or are you dealing with Mother Nature? And that's it. There's Mother Nature, there's the authority and the autonomy, and there's the serious fucking shit. Your job is to step in with the serious fucking shit. The authority and the autonomy, you are not allowed to touch that. That's theirs. This is where parents really mess this up. Authority and autonomy belongs to your child. It does not belong to you. I'm really going to say this again, because this is where parental abuse due to ignorance is. Your child's autonomy and their authority is not yours. It belongs to them. You fuck up your kid when you touch it. Don't touch it. It's bad for them. Best thing you could do is leave the autonomy and the authority alone. That being said, Mother Nature will take over with that. Mother Nature will take over with consequences. Where you need to step in is when your child is in some serious shit. But you should be doing preventative measures. What I recommend you doing is as soon as your child has the ability to speak, really sit down with your child and go over personal laws. Teach your child personal law, personal boundary. Personal boundary and personal law looks like your comfort. And this is huge. What makes you uncomfortable is good, and what makes you uncomfortable is not healthy. If you are feeling uncomfortable, then you should not do it. And this is a very simple rule for children. Huge rule. I use this for my children. Are you comfortable? When it comes to food, when it comes to anything like that, it's are you comfortable? My children have food trauma. So the rule in the house is you eat what you're comfortable with. If they want to gorge themselves on candy, I let them. And I let Mother Nature give them a bellyache. And I have. And they've gone, I'm so sick of candy, I'm ready for greens. Okay. And it's at a point now where my daughter no longer desires candies. She prefers vegetables and fruits and healthy food because I allowed Mother Nature to take care of that bellyache. Now, if you have a parent, and this is really a huge part of it. I've seen this so many times. So I'm going to go through a scenario with you. You really need to let the child get hurt. Oh, so I'm just supposed to let him walk in front of a car? Let's talk about that response. That is what a narcissist would say when they are being an argumentative asshole. They're absolutely not there to listen or learn, and it's black and white polarized thinking, and that is passive aggressive bullshit from a narcissist. So if that's the kind of shit that you're thinking or saying, you have your own shit to sort out. That being said, if that's the kind of shit you heard from your parents, they had a lot of bullshit that they needed to sort out. Passive aggressive is narcissistic aggression. There is a balanced middle road, and understanding precisely when and where that line is drawn is going to make the difference. You don't want one extreme one way or the other. You want the middle of the road. Should your child eat all the vegetables on the plate? Should your child eat? Mother Nature will deem this necessary. Should they try to eat all of the vegetables on the plate? I am so sick of the vegetable argument. I am a huge believer that if your child is a picky eater, your child should be left alone. I am a firm believer that if your child is not comfortable wearing socks a certain way, they should be left alone. I am a huge believer that if your child wants to wear no socks in their shoes, you should leave the child alone and they shouldn't. I am a firm believer that if a child decides to never eat meat or pick around on their plate, they shouldn't. That they should just be left alone. If you are worried about your child being a picky eater, that's because the child does not feel psychologically safe enough to try and sample everything on the plate. Arguing, negotiating. This is where it gets great. The options are arguing with a parent or with a child, negotiating with a parent or with a child, arguing, negotiating, and then there's the begging parent. And then there's the threatening parent. And then there's the pleading parent. And then there's the manipulative parent who likes to trick their child with lies. Don't make a big deal about it. That's a really big part of it. Do not. Let's try it. What's the word? The word I'm looking for. Because this is it right here. It's the indifference. Indifference. By playing indifference, this is where, and this is what's going on. Oh, wow, do I see what's going on? This is awesome. This is authority, power, control. This 100% is a power struggle between you and your child. Once you get into a power struggle with your child, game over, you've lost. You're done. As soon as you get into a power struggle, game over, and you are the loser. And this is why. Authority, power, and control is absolute. Parents are not going to like this, and I just don't give a shit, because this is really where people fuck up. Your authority belongs to you. Your child's authority belongs to them. If your child feels psychologically safe enough, then they will. It goes from being, and this is where the mimic mirror repetition response is so fucking solid, that if you are joyous about eating broccoli and you talk about how fucking awesome the broccoli is, and you eat the broccoli, the child is going to be so excited about eating the broccoli. It's seeing people go, oh my God, this broccoli is so good. Here, you got to try this broccoli. And you talk to somebody else and you act like you are enjoying the broccoli. I love broccoli, for the record. The child is going to become curious, because children do that, and they're going to repeat the behavior. But the minute you try forcing your child to eat something on the child's plate that the child doesn't want to eat, now you're getting into a power struggle. Because the first ethic, the first everything is freedom. This is so deeply ingrained in us. Freedom is the safety to choose and use your authority without fear. That is freedom. It is the ability to choose and use your authority without fear. And the moment you enter into a power struggle with your child through arguing, negotiating, begging, pleading, threatening, and manipulating, you just lost that fight. You officially have introduced a power struggle. You have surrendered your authority to your child with the negotiating and with the begging and the pleading. You have lost authority. You are now absolutely powerless. Your child is in charge. If you argue, you are officially no longer giving them a psychologically safe place. If you threaten, oh, you really have lost psychological safety. It's now dangerous. If you manipulate, not only is it dangerous, you also have violated trust. Technically, all of this is a violation of trust. So arguing, threatening, and manipulating is now a lack of psychological safety. The child will not budge because they don't feel safe enough to. In the area of negotiating and begging and pleading, you have thrown away your authority and have given it to your child. But if you act indifferent, and if you set a good example, now you maintain your authority while preserving your child's. And that is the secret recipe. That's it right there. You have to maintain your authority while also preserving your child's. You have to reserve your autonomy while also preserving your child's. When you understand this exchange and this balance, you're set. You got to keep it. You have to keep it aligned. This is really everything. Stop prioritizing the importance of nutrition. Like it's so trivial. Parents are obsessed with, terrified of making sure their children are eating healthy. And here's what's going on with that is the minute you start thinking like that, you start parenting with fear. And it shows. You're no longer a cheerleader. You have surrendered your freedom because now you are no longer choosing your authority for fear. You switched over. You immediately lost the battle. You cannot, under any circumstance, surrender or lose your authority. Likewise, you cannot violate your child's. You must preserve that psychological safety. The psychological safety is core to all of this. Let Mother Nature co-parent with you. Absolutely. Do not dole out consequences that Mother Nature will take care of, because that compromises the psychological safety. Do not compromise your role as cheerleader and boundary setter. And you are not supposed to be having your boundaries violate your child. This is where you have to learn how to have your autonomy and your authority side by side with your child's. And if you have not done the work to get your autonomy and your authority, this is seriously going to compromise your parenting skills. Seriously. The goal is to have both of you, your authority, and both of you, your autonomy. You need to have your personal laws for you, and the child needs their personal laws. You need to make sure that the child does stay away from the wrong, toxic people. Do not put your values on your child. That's going to seriously fuck up your child. Your politics do not belong to your child. Your religion does not belong to your child. Your tradition and your culture does not belong to your child. That's big. These are ethics that other people use perspective abuse to violate the autonomy and the authority of a child. And an autonomy and the authority is composed of all of the values and ethics that a human being chooses for themselves. And here's the thing. They are there in the child whether or not you have enforced them. They are there in the child whether or not you have placed them there. The child already has who they are by the time, according to Freud and Jung, 4 or 8 years old. They can't agree. 4 or 8 years old. I believe that by 4 years old, the child is defined. I think Jung is the one who said 8. I can't remember who said which. One of them said 4, the other is 8. But it's true. Like a human being has been defined. They know who they are by the time they are 4 years old. They know their ethics. They know what they want. They know what's right and wrong in the world. They don't need you to tell them. They are set. They are good to go. They just need you to leave them alone and support them and love them. Your job is to give your child unconditional belonging. Something that a lot of people have never heard of. In fact, I created the phrase, so no one has heard of this. Unconditional belonging is giving your child a place to be accepted without condition, no matter what. We are going to talk more about this later. Thank you so much for being my audience, and may the kindest of words always find you.